Hey everyone,
Hey everyone.
welcome to our live stream in October here. This is the last live stream in October and our last live stream for Preptober. So we are wrapping up tonight with a topic on subplots. So get ready for some fun conversation and interaction about subplots as we get kicked off. Now, we are going to do things slightly different tonight. We're going to make a little bit shorter live stream. So we're going to try to hit a half hour with a 20-minute writing sprint at the end. And then we'll follow up with some Q&A and just conversation after that. We're going to give a couple of things to think about subplots before we do our writing sprint. So I guess what I'm saying is we're going to talk a lot and then we're going to write a lot. So,
Yeah,
right,
that sounds
Ange?
good. Yeah, I like talking.
All
Talking
right.
is good. Stop staring at me. He does that. He stares at me.
Well,
So,
you said you like to talk a lot and then you just don't say anything. What the heck?
okay, so subplots. I love talking about subplots because subplots, one of the things I like about subplots is when I don't know if anybody else out there has ever read a book where you read the first portion of the book and you're like, yeah, this is so good. And then the book kind of slumps.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the midpoint slump.
Yeah, that midpoint section where, you just kind of.
A lot of books get put down during the midpoint slump.
In fact, we were talking to somebody this last weekend who's a writer and a reader, and they were talking about that it's so easy for them just to put the book down midway through because it loses interest. They just can't really track with it. They think it becomes boring. And then they miss the whole end of the book, which is where all the action and resolution takes place.
Yeah. I mean, I know I've done it. I've put down books in the
Sure.
midpoint. And so the reason why the reason why subplots are such an exciting tool for every writer to apply to their story. Subplots.
Because there's a T-Rex. T-Rexes, they're hungry.
They're scary. A subplot gives you it heightens the tension and the complexity in that midpoint.
Right. But not just in the midpoint.
No, all throughout.
It kind of is throughout, but it does help keep interest during that midpoint because you can really use the subplot to your advantage when you're just kind of doing the groundwork in your main conflict.
Well, yeah, because if you think about it, you've got your main conflict running right here. And so you're writing along, you got the main conflict, and then you can take your subplots, and the subplots, they run parallel to your main storyline, and then they intersect. So they bop up, and so you have a point of conflict or a point of escalation when the subplot intersects with your main storyline. And then the subplot goes down and you continue with the main storyline. Then another subplot can intersect, and it.
So if you have 2 or 3 good subplots going on in that midsection of the book, they can kind of peak and, cause some interest, keeps the reader engaged throughout that part of the story.
Yeah.
So I was just telling Angie as we got kicked off here that in the book I'm working on, I just finished one. I'm on the second book in the series, and that's what I'm going to do in our writing challenge here. But as I get kicked off thinking about that, I really have a variety of different subplots in the book. I have subplots with my protagonist. I have a subplot with my antagonist as well. And that is something that is very interesting because your antagonist subplot needs to always further the story, but it can help your antagonist kind of appear like a good guy.
Well, one of the things that subplots do is that they add more complexity to your characters. And you really, I don't know, I really love a really good antagonist. Like, they're fun. They're fun to write and they're fun to read. Like, a really complex bad guy is really cool.
This is really good.
Yes.
So we want to have antagonists or bad guys that we really love to hate, right?
Yes.
And that's why I have a subplot with my antagonist, because you're just not sure, is he a good guy, a bad guy? I
Yeah.
love him, but I hate him at the same
Yeah.
time. So that's kind of why I chose to do that. But so I have probably too many subplots in my book, actually, because it's really complex. So as I go into the second book of the series, I'm going to try to focus my subplots and bring them to a place that they're really enhancing the overall storyline.
This is true. Another thought on bouncing off of what you just said is that do not think about your subplot as just a mini story within your story.
Right.
It needs to further your plot.
So what's the different types of subplots?
Hold on. I gotta say hi to Miss Blogger. And
hi, Miss Blogger.
Joshua says that my bad guys are still pretty flat.
Okay, so what do you do with a flat bad guy?
Well, you want to really, one of the things you can do about your bad guy to make him not be flat is think about the idea of a pet the cat moment, pet the dog moment. Give your bad guy a moment where he does something good for somebody else, and that helps give your bad guy more depth, and it helps the audience to go, okay, wait a minute, this bad guy just did something good. So if you can find, that's one tip for making your bad guys more complex.
Yeah, and if they're flat, then you probably want to show them doing other things besides the main job, which is trying to get rid of your hero or overthrow your hero, or just being a pain.
Give them a characteristic or something that people want to root for.
Yeah, so you're making them, in some ways, you're making them kind of like a good guy, but they have bad motives or something like that. Because if you can make your bad guy interesting like that, then it really does kind of help bring them to life.
It does. So that's just a tip on that. So back to subplots.
Subplots. Different types of subplots.
Different types of subplots.
Right.
So there's a lot of different types of subplots.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm just going to talk about 4.
Okay.
Okay. So the first
one. How about you just do one at a time, though?
Well, yeah, I'm going to do one at a time. One at a time. The first one is the mirror subplot, like a mirror that you look in.
And this one is a little bit confusing to me. I don't really like the mirror subplot so much, just because I don't like writing it, I guess. Go ahead. What is it?
Well, a mirror subplot is where you have your main storyline and you have your some sub characters that are going through a similar situation. And so
see, she can't even explain it. So
no. The subplot mirrors the storyline, and your sub character and what happens there, and the choices and the things that happen. Your main character learns something from what the other person did, and it helps your main character on their journey.
Okay.
That's simple.
Okay. Can you give us an example since it was so simple?
Okay. So think about a rom-com, and you've got 2 best friends, and they're both these 2 girls, and they're best friends, and they both want to fall in love. And so they go on their journey to fall in love, which usually is what happens in a rom-com. And a lot of rom-coms have other subplots in them, but they also often have a mirror subplot, because these 2 best friends, they both fall in love and they both make choices, and they both learn from each other in the choices that they make in their path to find true love.
Okay. So I guess I get that, because you have your main storyline and then you have a secondary storyline that you're just not diving into as much.
Yes.
But it's kind of the same storyline.
Yeah, because it intersects. It's all woven together, and they learn from each other.
So what's another type of subplot?
Well, another one is going to be contrasting, which is
Okay.
very similar to the mirror one.
Right.
The contrasting is a similar thing. You've got your main storyline, you've got sub characters that are going through a similar thing, but they make really bad choices. Really bad.
So they do all the wrong
They do
stuff.
all the wrong stuff, and the main character learns what not to do from the subplot.
So then your main storyline is going to have the plot, which turns out one way, and
Yes.
your subplot is similar, but it turns out the wrong way.
Her best friend ends up with a broken heart because of her choices, and the main character realizes, hey, that was really stupid. I think I'll do something different.
So
that would be a contrasting.
So do you have an example of that?
Not right now, I don't.
Well,
I mean, I can sit and think of.
we kind of have an example of that in our book Shimmer.
Yeah.
There is the main character, and she gets sold, and the marriage edict, this whole thing, and then there's another character who also gets caught up in the marriage edict, but her choices and what happens
It
to
didn't
her
turn out so good for
is
her.
very different, very bad, when the
Yes.
main character made different choices and it turned out very good.
Yes.
Not to give a spoiler about the book, but but that's one example.
Yes.
But I guess you'd have to be familiar with Shimmer, the storyline there, to understand. But really, it's just that they turned out very different.
Yes, and I think you can, if you stop and think about books you've read or movies you've watched, and you went, oh, if you think about it, next time you watch a movie, watch for a mirror subplot,
Mhm.
watch for the contrasting, and you'll probably be able to pick them out.
Yeah, and I think you might see that more in like a TV series, because
Yeah.
they're kind of in and out, and so they have a variety of different characters that are coming in and out of the story, but they're not really the story. So
Yeah.
what's another type of subplot?
Another one is complicating subplot, which I am going to use a complicating subplot in what I'm going to be writing in November.
Mhm.
And a complicating subplot is where the actions and the reactions of the subplot makes the life of your main character way more complicated and challenging. It increases the difficulty for your main character.
So that seems like it's a very useful subplot. I'm going to use that subplot in my story, definitely. Do you have an example of what that would look like as you're writing?
I'm kind of empty of examples.
This is her
So
topic, and maybe she just needs a cup of coffee. That's what it
that
is.
might help.
So,
Okay, so an example of a complicating, it's from, I could give an example from Shimmer, where the main character ends up married to this man, and the complicating subplot is the relationship that he had with one of the other characters previous to her. And
okay,
it complicates life for the main character because this other character is jealous and causes lots of problems for our
Right.
main character.
Right. So in a subplot like that, you can really use that to your advantage, because at any point, somebody from your hero's past or current life can kind of pop in and make things way more complicated for whatever task it is that they're trying to accomplish, or love interest that they have, or
Yes,
whatever
this
it
is
is.
why when you're doing your character sketch, it's really useful if you have a couple of key points from your character's backstory. What is the worst possible thing that's ever happened to your character?
Okay, so what's another type of subplot?
Well, there's the obvious one. There's the romantic subplot.
Okay.
And would you like an example? Romantic subplot, because I mean, it kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it? Romantic subplot is where you have your main storyline, and then you have a lot of times it's a romantic triangle, and that is woven throughout the main storyline. your romantic triangle. And now I will say that most subplots, you want them to be resolved before the end of the book. The only exception to that is romantic subplots. Romantic subplots are often not tied up and finished until the very end of the book. And romantic subplot's the only one that's like that.
Well, I don't know about that, because sometimes you can have maybe not a full subplot, but you can have little hints of a subplot that foreshadow what's going to happen in the future if you're
Yes.
writing a series.
Yes.
So I have a few of those in my current series where I have a subplot that's kind of developed. It's not fully developed because it's foreshadowing what's going to come up in the next book. And so I think if you are thinking about a series of books, you can use subplots to foreshadow 2-3 books down the road.
Yes.
And that is very helpful when you're writing those books down the road, because you've got content and conflict that's already been put into play, just not completely developed.
Yes. And that really is, when you're talking about planning what you're going to write, if you can put a little bit of forethought into what subplot types do you want to have in your book, and who is going to be involved in these subplots, which characters. If you put a little bit of thought in that before you start writing, then as you're writing, then you can weave that into your story and use it to add tension and raise the conflict and make your characters, give your characters more depth. That's the power of subplots.
So, I mean, we already talked about this a little bit, but how many subplots do you guys have in your story right now? Maybe just let me ask you, if you want to put that in the comments, that'd be great. Do you have 1 subplot, 2, 3 subplots, or more? I think in the book that I'm getting ready to go into for our writing challenge here in November, I probably have 5 or maybe 6 subplots. So it's a very complicated book. It's a very complicated story, but I do have a lot of subplots in mine. How about you?
I don't know how many this one's going to end up with, but you know, you want to make sure that you don't have too many subplots and make sure that they fit your story.
Well, that's my challenge, I guess, because I take the simple and make it complex.
You are very good at that.
I am very good at that. All right, should we do a writing challenge?
Writing sprint.
A writing sprint, sorry.
I want to do a writing sprint. Are you guys ready?
All right, let's do it. Let's see if we can put down some words tonight, and then we'll come back on and chat a little bit more, wrap things up. All right, 19 minutes. Here we go. No romance, Joshua. All right. So you got to be using one of the other subplots, or types of the subplots. If you're not going to have romance, then you got to have the complicating one, maybe, where something is complicating. Hey, I'm talking to Josh. Something is complicating the hero's objectives. So, yeah. Anyway, when you get in trouble, I better write.
Aha.
All right. So how did you do? How did you do, Josh? Did you get a few words down? I hope so. How about you, Ange? How did you do?
I did good. I was mostly thinking about subplots and writing down my ideas for subplots, and I got 520 words.
Wow. 500 words just with ideas.
Yes.
Wow.
Just writing down all my random ideas, kind of like a brainstorm. What are the different subplots I was thinking of as potential? And so I really like some of the chatter, and it looks like you were commenting.
Yeah, I made a few comments because I was just kind of brainstorming as well, writing down some notes. Sounds like that's what Josh was doing, is just writing down some notes. So as we move forward, we're going to hit November here before our next Monday, Write With Us Live.
Yes.
So we're going to be launching into our writing of our story. Hopefully we have everything prepared. So this week, take a little extra time just to make sure you got your outline, your ideas, everything ready. Josh, I know you're already just writing on that, so you've already got some things in place, and that's great.
Miss Blogger has a comment. It says, I'm working on my character profiles for my 2 main characters in my fiction, fantasy, and contemporary paranormal romance novel. I would love to hear from you, Miss Blogger, how in depth you're getting with your character profiles.
Yeah, that would be great.
Would love to hear from you. And I had some thoughts on what Joshua was saying. It's interesting because your subplots and the things that you use in your story, really, it matters who your audience is.
Yeah,
I just wanted to add to that because that really matters.
It does, because if you're not writing what your audience wants to read, they're not gonna give your book to their friends, really. Right. And that's what we want. We want them to read it and give it to their friends.
Yes, that is what we want.
All right, so we're going to wrap up for today. I appreciate everybody taking a few minutes to join us for our live Write With Us time and talking about subplots. And if you have questions or want to make comments, please do that, even if you're just watching this afterwards, and we'll interact with those as well. But we're going to take off for tonight and say thanks for joining. We'll see you
joining us, everyone.
next time.